So this is October 21st, 2021. Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for joining us again. I obeisances too.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So today we are going to be doing a review of the Southern Ocean of the Nectar of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is Bhakti Rasamrita Nectar Devotion, chapters 20 to 34. So we're going to be doing a review, and what I've basically done is I've taken slides from each of the sections and put them together. Okay. And we're going to be stopping basically at the end of each section, just briefly. So at the end of each section, able to take just one or two questions, and then we'll have a little bit of time also at the end. This is again a summary. I want to acknowledge for help with this, Vanuswami, Vijay Somasundaram, Hari Parshad, Hriday Nandamarj, and Vrajakishore, who helped me at different junctures, especially with particularly difficult Sanskrit questions that I had. So again, that the Nectar Devotion is authorized scripture. Why? We're going to give three reasons why it's authorized scripture. One is that Rupa Goswami is quoting extensively from Shastra to substantiate all his points, analysis, and conclusions. So this is not just what he's saying himself. This is, of course, a very important point for anybody who's teaching or preaching or presenting anything on Gaudiya Vaishnava theology and practice, that everything has to be backed up. There has to be pramanas given. So Rupa Goswami is doing that extensively. Another reason why it's authorized scripture is it's based on the work of Bharat Muni, his Natya Shastra, and Rupa Goswami has adapted Bharat Muni's system to explain the transcendence. Bharat Muni's system explains ordinary theater and ordinary life. It's also authorized scripture, as Srila Prabhupada explains, that Rupa Goswami first met Lord Chaitanya at Prayag, Allahabad, and on the Dasavameda bathing ghat of that holy city, the Lord instructed him continuously for 10 days. The Lord particularly instructed Rupa Goswami on the science of Krishna consciousness. So this instruction of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, this decision to use the system of Bharat Muni, this comes from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And of course, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu means the nectar of the ocean of devotion. And this section, the Southern Ocean, deals with Vibhava, Anubhava, Sattvika Bhava, Vyavichari Bhava, and Sthayi Bhava. So just a review from the very beginning of what is rasa, and from the preface of Nectar Devotion, Prabhupada says that Bhakti Rasa is the spiritual pleasure of devotional service, which one can taste by being trained in the science of devotional service. Also in the preface, he says Bhakti means devotional service, that every service has some attractive feature that drives the servitor progressively on and on. And he talks about material rasa. He says the force which drives the philanthropist, the householder, and the nationalist is called rasa, or a kind of relationship whose taste is very sweet. But Bhakti rasa is different from ordinary rasa. Prabhupada also says, without relishing some sort of mellow or loving mood in one's activities, no one can continue to perform such activities. That means that everything we do, every single thing that we do, we are doing to get some kind of taste from. Understanding this science of rasas given in the Southern Ocean is not only so that we can appreciate the transcendence It's also that we can try to understand how we are trying to pervertedly enjoy the transcendence and therefore substitute the reality for the illusion. The Prabhupada says, similarly, in the transcendental life, there must be some taste from the service. So rasa literally means juice, the flavor, what we enjoy, the pleasure and joy we get from any experience. These slides, by the way, are from Raja Kishore. So the supreme substance is prema bhakti. And any kind of rasa has the same basic dynamics, the spiritual rasa or the perverted rasa. It gets stimulated, it produces transformations, and this section looks at the various ingredients of rasa. The vibhava, the sattvic bhava, these are the ingredients of rasa. When they're enjoyed together, they're called rasa. So the dynamics, there's a basic connection to the flavor of the thing. That connection is stimulated somehow. There's a tangible result from the stimulation, an expression, automatic tangible result, involuntary expression, and an emotional result. The basic connection is the staibhav. The stimulants are the vibhav, voluntary expression, anubhava, involuntary, sattvic bhavs, and emotions, vyabhichari bhavs. All right, so now we're going to review each of these in turn. It's going to be obviously a very fast review. And as I said, we'll stop at the end of each section. We'll only have time for like 1 or 2 questions. So vibhava. Vibhava has 2 main categories, alambana and udipana. The alambana are the basic stimulants and the udipana, the variegated stimulants. So the basic impelling feature is the Vishaya, the experience object of love, Krishna, and Ashraya, the experiencer, the shelter, the devotee. So the alambana or basic Vishaya, Krishna, and Ashraya, the devotee. And Udipana, impelling, Krishna's qualities, adventures, dress, ornaments, fruit, footprints, places, tulsi, devotees, and special days. Now, vibhava cannot stimulate someone who doesn't have at least a little bit of rati. There has to be some rati within the self for it to be stimulated. Just like Prabhupada talks about a child learning how to walk. He says that this practice, it brings out the innate walking ability in a child. Yes? And therefore we find, like, if somebody doesn't have attraction to Krishna, like a demon, they'll see Krishna, they'll see the devotees, they'll see Krishna's flute, and it doesn't stimulate their love. Right? Krishna as the Vishaya. So this is Krishna himself, but also other forms, like when he expanded as the cowherd boys and calves. In that case, he appeared to be both the Vishaya and the Ashraya. And Krishna in a disguised form. Here we have a picture of Krishna disguised as a boatman, and undisguised form. And Krishna as the Vishaya, this is where Rupa Goswami goes into this long description of Krishna's qualities. One of the most wonderful parts of the Nectar Devotion, 50 qualities that only jivas have, 5 more qualities that also Shiva has, 5 more that also Vishnu manifests, and 4 that only Krishna manifests. Sweetness of pastimes, sweet devotees, sweetness of his flute, sweetness of his form, and all of these are perfect in Dwarka, more perfect in Mathura, and most perfect in Vraja. Then in addition to those qualities, another part of the vibhava, alambana, vishaya, is Krishna's personality. Dhirodata, the noble hero, Dhiralalita, the romantic and fun-loving, Dhiraprasanta, the peaceful gentleman, and Dhirodata, the haughty bad boy. Does Krishna have any faults? Well, he's free of the 18 faults. However, 16 of those he does have in a perfect form. So going on to the next section of vibhava, this is vibhava. Alambana is the ashraya, the devotees. So this is particularly for someone who has rati. This is particularly even a little sprout of rati. This is particularly devotees who have a similar rati. So that means, for Lalita, ashraya is Srimati Radharani. Ashraya is Vishaka, is Champakalata, is Sudevi, etc. So for Subal, the Ashraya is going to be Ujwala, Sridharma. So again, we can understand this in our regular life, right? That if you're loving your child, your spouse is also an impetus for you to love your child, because your spouse hopefully also loves your child. So when you see your husband playing with your child, your love for your child also increases. So your child increases your love for your child, and your husband increases your love for your child, or your wife increases your love for your child. So these devotees who are sheltered have different types by attainment. Are they sadhakas? Are they siddhas? Siddhas as are they siddhas by sadhana, by mercy? Are they always siddhas, and by their particular rasa, by their staiva? Okay. So then ashraya, again, we have two groups. Those who are cultivating devotional service in order to enter into the transcendental kingdom. This is the sadhakas. Now, these sadhakas would have to have at least a little sprout of rati in order to be in the category of ashraya. And those who are ready in the perfectional stage of devotional service. As far as the categories of those who are ready in the perfectional stage of devotional service, those who have become perfect, and those have two categories: those who become perfect by sadhana, and those who have become perfect by mercy, by kripa siddha, and then those who have always been perfect, the nitya siddha. Then going on to the other main category of vibhava is the udipana. So here again, we look at Krishna's qualities. And Krishna's qualities, his bodily qualities, his verbal qualities, his mental qualities. In his bodily qualities, we look specifically at 3 ages: his pastimes, his accessories like his hairstyle, flowers, tilak, etc., his dress, his 2-piece dress, his 4-piece dress, and his elaborate dress. And then miscellaneous things like his ornaments, flute, horn, belts, devotees, festivals, etc. Now, these would be devotees who are not in one same rati. And as far as Krishna's qualities, so the form of Krishna himself is his alambana, his ornaments, age, and other items act only as udipana, but his qualities can act either way. So if it's like Krishna, who's very merciful, then that's in alambana. If it's Krishna's mercy, then that's an udipana. Krishna's qualities, so he has bodily qualities like softness, mental qualities like genius, speech qualities like linguist. Ages, he has Kumara up to 5, Purganda from 6 through 10, Kaishora, and 3 parts of Kaishora, 11 to 12, 13 through 14, and 15 to 16. And then Krishna in Vrindavan does not age beyond 16. And his apparel and garlands, his clothing, his ornaments, his decorations, other things. The pujari is taking care of his clothing, that may act as an udipana. Krishna's accessories, his hairstyles, applied cosmetics, his garlands, his tilak, tilak on the forehead, betel nut preparations, imitation lotuses. And then there's all miscellaneous things: his ornaments, his smile, his fragrance, his flute, his horn, his anklets, his conch, his footprints, his places, his tulsi, his devotees, and his festival days. Reminds me of the song Sutta Bhagavata by Bhakti Vinod Thakur. All right, so we have a few minutes. If anybody has any questions that they would like to bring up on Vibhava. Any questions, any points of discussion that anybody has on Vibhava? Yes, Shamjoti Krishna Prabhu.
So, is it correct understanding to understand that Krishna is Alambana, and even Gopi's and everyone else, all the other devotees, they are his, expansions and Haladini Shakti, etc. But that comes under Udipana, or no?
Some would be
His
under Ashraya,
mercy.
some would be under Ashraya. So if you have the Rati of parental, let's say that you love Krishna as your child. So then the other devotees who love Krishna like a child would be the Ashraya for you, not the Udipana. And then Krishna's friends and the gopis, and they would be Udipanas for you. Now, if you love Krishna as your master, then the other servants are the Ashraya for you. And the devotees who love Krishna as a child or as a friend would be the Udipana for you. So for each person, who's the Ashraya and who's the Udipana is going to be different.
Thank you.
I mean, again, if you think of it in material terms, do you have wife and children? Yes. Okay. So when you are feeling affection for your children, so your child is the alambana vishaya. They're the object of your affection. Then your wife would be the alambana ashraya. Let's say your wife is reading a book to your child. So when you see your wife reading a book to your child, then you also may feel more affection for your child, right? Does that happen? Yes. So your wife may stimulate affection for your child. So she's acting as an ashraya. Then you may see your child playing with other children. That may also stimulate your love for your child, but your child's friends are udipanas, not ashraya, because their affection for your child is in a different mood. Is that clear? Thank you. I'm very glad you brought that up. Thank you. Any other questions on Vibhava? Questions or comments, realizations, anything anybody would like to share?
How
Yes?
how to awaken Rati?
How to awaken Rati? That's the whole process of sadhana. So hearing, chanting, remembering Krishna, all of these things, the 9 processes of bhakti, or you can explain it as the 64 angas of bhakti, as was already explained in the Eastern Ocean of Nectar Devotion. So that's the process. And it has to awaken on its own time. It's just like, when does a person become physically mature? So some people become physically mature when they're 9, some people become physically mature when they're 16. That's, it's not according to some absolute formula when a person matures. But if you eat healthy food and you get exercise and you're not diseased, then you're going to mature from a child to an adult. That will happen. So the Rati will sprout in anyone who's following the process of Krishna consciousness. And we could say, we can say chanting is the most important. We could say hearing is the most important. We could just say association of the devotees is the most important. Any of those we could say. I mean, Rupa Goswami says most important are to take shelter of a spiritual master, take initiation, and to serve the spiritual master. And then the most potent are chanting the holy name, being in a holy place, or making your place a holy place, association with devotees, studying the scripture, and worshiping the deity. But you take a little charitamrita, it could awaken Rati. Advaita Krishna Prabhu.
What is intensity or the maturity of Rati has to attain so that we can have rasa or bhakti rasa?
Prema. So full rasa is not experienced until prema. And that we'll look at we looked at that in last week's class, so in depth. So you might want to review the end of the recording of last week's class. So until bhava, as long as one is a sadhaka, one is experiencing some hints and some flavors of these different elements of rasa. So once one's rati has has awakened, once it's even a little sprout, then one is experiencing each of these elements of rasa separately to some degree. To whatever degree one is experiencing rati, to that degree one will also experience vibhava and vyavicari bhava and so forth. At bhava, one really experiences each of these ingredients. One is experiencing them separately, and at prema, one experiences them as rasa. So we'll touch on that at the end of today's class as a review, but if you want to go more deeply, as I say, that's the end of last week's.
So, Mataji, what is it that in the course of our lives, like even like maybe the first day or the first week we're at the temple, or things that has happened that always stays in your heart and doesn't go away? And what's that then? It's not rasa. In relationship to Krishna, or service we've done, or remembrance we have.
No, we are getting some, there's some taste. Like Rupa Goswami says, the qualification, the very beginning of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He says the qualification for taking up Vaidhi Bhakti is that you have some taste. Tamal Krishna Maharaj used to say how when he took his traveling party, that they would have a kirtan, he'd give a little lecture, they'd distribute prasadam, and then they'd walk around, like let's say they're at a park, you know, they walk around to the people and they'd say, you know, did you like the music? Do you like the food? And then, yeah, it was all right. Then they wouldn't bother talking to them. But if they said, yeah, wow, this food was amazing, then they would cultivate them. So there's some taste there. I mean, I remember devotees telling a story how they were traveling on Sankirtan. They stopped at a gas station, petrol station, and some woman runs out of the shop, running the shop. She runs out and she said, "Are you the Hare Krishnas? Do you have one of those little white balls? I've been thinking about it for the last 5 years." So that's somewhat of a taste, somewhat of an attraction, but full-blown rasa is not experienced until prema.
So is those tastes a manifestation of Aladini Shakti?
Yes, but not fully. Yes, there's some element of prema there, even in Adushraddha. Has to be, but it's not full. We want to give a material example. So I have a great grandson here. He's 1.5. He's learning how to talk. And if he wants to say thank you, he say danku. So if you're not the parents, you wouldn't know what he was saying. If you're not family member, you know, he wants something and you give it to him, you know, he wants some. And offered it to the temple deities here. So we gave him some blueberry pie and then he says, more. And I say, please. He says, more pea. So, and then I give it to him. He said, danku. So is that language? Yes. Is it language? No.
Okay.
Is he capable? Could he communicate with you? No, you would have no idea what he was saying. It would just sound like random noises. So it's not language, but it is language.
Yes.
Another example that I give is, and this is very relevant to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, because Bharat Muni's system has to do with drama. So when does a drama start? When does a performance start? Does it start with the idea in the mind of the scriptwriter? Does it start when the scriptwriter writes the script? Does it start when you get the actors who are going to play in it? Does it start when the actors are rehearsing? Does it start when the curtains open for the actual performance to the audience? So when does it start? At any of those places. It depends how you want to think about it. But the actual performance to the audience, when the curtains open, that's really when the drama is starting. However, even the concept for the script is also a kind of starting. And the final performance is there to some extent, even in the idea of the script, in the scriptwriter. But rasa doesn't really happen until the final performance is there with costume and scenery in front of an audience. Only then is there going to be actual rasa happening in the audience, but there's some element of it even in the concept. Okay, thank you very much. So we're going
Thank
to
you.
go on now to the next
Oh, okay.
point. Okay, so now we're going to go to Anubhava. So Anubhava is voluntary expressions, physical expressions of one's emotions for Krishna, one's Rati. And it's called Shita without strong bodily movement and Kshepana with strong bodily movement. And Shita literally means cool, but this doesn't mean temperature, it just intensity. So here Rupa Goswami gives examples. What doesn't have much intensity are yawning, singing, breathing heavily, disregarding others, drooling, smiling. And Kshepana, which literally means throwing about, things like dancing, rolling on the ground, shouting, stretching the body, bellowing, laughing loudly, whirling about, hiccups, or belching. Now, there's also many other examples that are specific for each primary and secondary rasa. And although this was not included by Rupa Goswami in this section of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it's included in the Western and Northern sections. So in the Western section, he includes it for each primary rati, and for the in the Northern section, he includes it for each secondary rati. So we included that in our presentation briefly, just to give a more full picture that practically any service one is doing for Krishna with one's body voluntarily is in this category of Anubhava. Also, we discussed how the symptoms of the stage of bhava, from Shraddha to Prema, the symptoms of the stage of bhava, these are also listed as Anubhavas, as quoted from CC Madhya 23:18 through 19. Forgiveness, concern that time should not be wasted, detachment, absence of false prestige, hope, eagerness, a taste for chanting the holy name of the Lord, attachments to descriptions of the transcendental qualities of the Lord, and affection for those places where the Lord resides. So these are also Anubhavas. Okay, do we have any questions or discussion on Anubhava? Yes, Vinata.
These Anubhavas that you just listed at the stage of Bhava, do they fall in the category of this cool or this other?
Some are, there are some in each category.
It looks like more there, like with not
Mostly
much
they're
movement.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're cool. Thank you. That's a good realization. If you look back at the PowerPoint that I did on Anubhavas, where you'll see the list given for each of the primary and secondary rasas, then you'll see that, you know, a lot of those are more of the shapiness. But yes, for the ones for bhava are mostly the shitas.
And I had one question on the previous
Yes.
section, if I can ask.
Yes.
Yeah, if I have not forgotten now. Yes, if a person's we meet shows some attraction for us, and then on the basis of that attraction, we share Krishna consciousness with them. Is it kind of a taste that they are showing the taste for Krishna? Can we say that they have a taste, and then because
Yes.
of that we can like
Yes.
treat them as aspirants or something, whatever, like future.
Yeah. And I in this regard, I'd like to tell this story of when we met with Srila Prabhupada in 1974 in Chicago. So this was, my father was meeting Srila Prabhupada for the first time. So was I. I was already initiated in the male, but my husband had met Prabhupada when my husband was a brahmachari in 1970. So he'd met him before, but I was meeting Prabhupada for the first time. This was my father. And my father asked Srila Prabhupada, is it all right if I come to the temple just to see my daughter and son-in-law? I'm not coming to see Krishna. And Prabhupada said, yes. He said, they are loving Krishna. He said, chanting and dancing are symptoms of loving Krishna. They are loving Krishna and you are loving them. So two things equal to the same thing are equal to each other. So if somebody is attracted to you and has a taste for serving you, that is also an opening. And it's some taste involving with Krishna consciousness. If you are trying to focus.
Thank you. But how far can we push these people like it is individual?
Excuse me?
How far can we like expose these people to the Krishna consciousness? That's individual, that's up to their...
Of course, of course. I mean, we're not supposed to preach to people past their faith. So this involves two things. It involves building their faith, helping them to build their faith so we can preach to them further, and preaching them according to their present level of faith. You know, just like a school, you teach a child according, or an adult, according to their present level of capacity, and you also build their capacity. So we should be doing both. We should be preaching to people according to their level of faith in a way that will build their level of faith, take them to the next.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Prabhupada Priya?
Hare Krishna. I was wondering if any devotional service could be considered Anubhava.
Generally.
So it doesn't, I mean, the examples that you gave as the symptoms of Bhava Bhakti, that's very exalted, but any inspiration to do anything for Krishna and actually doing it physically is an Anubhava.
Yes. Again, in order to really be called Anubhava, there has to be at least a sprout of Rati. So if one is inviting sadhana bhakti without any sprout of Rati at all, and one may be inspired to do some devotional service because you want liberation, or one may be inspired to do some devotional service so the other devotees in the temple will praise you or something. That's, you know, in another sense, these categories can be applied even to material things. These are categories of Bharat Muni that can be applied to material things. So, you know, because I love my wife, I want to buy her a diamond bracelet. But there's some love from there's some Rati from my wife, therefore I want to buy her a diamond bracelet. So you can look at it in either way.
Does Rati necessarily mean that you know your relationship with Krishna, or it could be a generalized, that you just understand
If
that
you want to talk about generalized, then you'd have to talk about neutrality. So if you want to say this is a very generalized Rati, then there is a category of neutral love of God, the neutral Rati, which, as Rupa Goswami says, is found in common people or in children. I just love God in a general way. So that is possible, that a person could have a very generalized neutral love of God that is actually Rati, that is motivating them.
But I mean more in the sense of like, you know, new devotees, that they have a realization that, yeah, I'm a servant of Krishna, I'm Krishna's eternal servant, and I do have a relationship with him, but I don't know what that is yet, but I'm waiting to find out. And
that would be more neutral love of God, even though it's being expressed in some sort of service. It's not, you know, when we talk about servitorship, and this is an interesting point, which we do not have time to get into now, but in the 9 processes of devotion, there's also service and friendship. Yes. So the service and friendship listed in the 9 processes of devotion are not ratis. It's not talking about, when we say serving Krishna is one of the 9 processes, that we're talking about, I have a mood of raktak. And if we're saying friendship in the mood of devotion, we're not saying I have a mood of subho. So I have I've not done one on service, but I've done one on friendship, which you should be able to find on YouTube, where I go through how friendship is exhibited in sadhana bhakti without an awakening of a rati of friendship. I mean, do keep in mind that the qualities of friendship are also exhibited in Vatsalya Rati and in Madhurya Rati. So even those who have awakened some of their Rati I want to do all 9. I've done, I think, 4.
Mm.
So then that's different. Although you can also look at friendship as a rati. So the Anubhava, the activities done by Vaidhi sadhakas who have no concept of their rati and their feeling of affection for Krishna is very immature and general, could be called Anubhavas in the sense that any action to experience any kind of taste with anybody could be called an Anubhava. And because there's some interest in Krishna, even for a beginner, we could say that there's some degree of spiritual Anubhava. But in terms of what Rupa Goswami is talking about here, we'd have to say no. We'd have to say one would have to be at least a Raganuga sadhaka in order for it to be of the category that Rupa Goswami is talking about. So again, this is when does the performance start?
Hmm.
You know, it's, and you could look at it either way. And you find that Srila Prabhupada does. You'll find that Srila Prabhupada will define pure devotee as a beginner in the process of pure devotional service. And he defines pure devotee as somebody who's on the platform of prema. I mean, another way you can look at this is with Madhurya Kadambini, where Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says how in the beginning our self-absorption is total and our spiritual absorption is a trace.
Hmm.
And at each stage, our self-absorption decreases and our spiritual absorption increases. So that means there's some trace of rati, there's some trace of it, even in the very beginning, even when our material absorption is practically absolute. And as we progress, the Prabhupada says, what did it say? Gradually and proportionately. So that means there's some, even for somebody in the beginning, there's some real thing there. There's some real thing there. It's not that it's false, then poof, it's real. There's something real there. Even, I mean, the example that I give also is like you have a cup. You know, the impersonalists, the voidists, they empty the cup. They want to empty the cup. Empty cup. Then once the cup is empty, right, this is what Krishna says, that if you, first of all, emptying your cup is hard. Getting rid of all your material rasa is hard. Then once you have an empty cup, filling it with spiritual rasa, Prabhupada says, is hard because you become accustomed to this concept that anything with taste and relationship is bad. Whereas our bhakti process, we have a cup full of material perverted rasa. And we start pouring in, this is a gift of Mahalakshmi, by the way, we start pouring in some bhakti rasa into our cup. Our cup is full of material rasa, and as we better make sure we have a bowl around it to catch the overflow. So we start pouring bhakti rasa into our cup, and as we keep doing that, and we don't pour in any material rasa, the proportion of bhakti rasa to material rasa keeps increasing. And once we get to a point of nishta, which is about half and half, then at that point, near the end of an arjuna vritti, Prabhupada talks about that real rati starts to sprout. Okay, I need to go on. Please excuse me. Going back and forth here. Okay, Sattvika Bhava. Okay. So Sattvika Bhava is in relation to the primary and secondary sthayibhavas. It can be also indirectly related. It can be from an abhas, a rati abhas, and there's varieties of intensity. Okay, so the word sattva in Sattvika Bhava, Sattvika is related to the word sattva, which is, I'm guessing, why Srila Prabhupada called this existential ecstasy, having to do with existence, because sat has to do with existence. So when the heart becomes overwhelmed by ratis, by one's sthai bhava, by one's basic relationship with Krishna, either directly, which is the primary sthai bhava, neutrality, servitorship, friendship, etc., or indirectly, joy, wonder, anger, etc., then a state happens in the heart called sattva. That's not sattva guna. So the types of sattvika bhava are snigdha. This is called soft or moist. Prabhupada calls it moist. The literal meaning of snigdha is soft. And this is experienced by devotees who have rati, and the sattvika bhava is related to that rati. Either they're a primary or secondary. Another kind of sattvika bhava is digdha, which literally means mixed, soft, and harsh. Srila Prabhupada translates this as burnt. This is experienced by devotees who have rati, but the sattvika bhava is not directly related to a relationship with Krishna. Then there's ruksha, which just means harsh, literally. Prabhupada translates it as dried up. This is experienced by persons with a semblance of love for Krishna, a rati bhas. Okay, so the heart becomes overwhelmed with a bhava related to Krishna. It offers itself to the prana with force. The prana undergoes change. The prana, as is undergone change, disturbs the body. And then the sattvika bhavas become visible in the devotee's body, and it can affect the body in terms of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, which would determine which of these sattvika bhavas: paralysis, perspiration, herpulation, choked voice, quivering, change of color, tears, fainting. So which of these depends on how the prana is interacting with the elements of the body. And there's three types of increase: how long the sattvika bhava lasts, how pervasive it is within the body, and how much it exhibits its essential nature. So in terms of increasing intensity, there's smoky, luminous, brilliant, very brilliant, and supremely brilliant. So smoky is a slight sattvika bhava, which can be concealed. And the way it's concealed is the devotee turns their attention away from their rati. Luminous, 2 or 3 at once, which can be concealed, but is very difficult. Brilliant, 3 to 5 at once, that cannot be concealed. Very brilliant, 5 or more unconcealed. Supremely brilliant is in Mahabhav, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All right, and then there are false forms. There's rati abhas. So let's say you're near an ecstatic devotee, and you're getting an abhas, a shadow or reflection from them of rati, and so therefore you experience a sattvika bhava. So this is the same as the ruksha sattvika bhava, the dried up form. Then there's sattvika abhas. So this is, you're just very soft-hearted person, and you hear about Krishna, you're materially soft-hearted. Or you're a hard-hearted person, but somehow Krishna Katha is just affecting you. So this is by hearing Krishna Katha. You're not getting a semblance of rati, though. You're getting a semblance of sattva. Then there's nisattva. This is an actor. They're not experiencing any emotion at all. They just practice crying in kirtan so the people will give them money. And pratipa is the demons. So the demons see Krishna and they shake in fear. There's no rati at all. Okay, any questions on sattvika bhava? Questions or comments on sattvika bhava? Ratnam.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Mataji, can one experience Sattvika Bhava before Bhava or after Bhava stage?
You mean the stage of bhava?
In the stage of Bhava or before Bhava?
As soon as one's rati with Krishna awakens, which for most people is going to happen in sadhana bhakti, then yes, as soon as one rati awakens, one is starting to experiencing all of these different bhavas. One cannot execute Raganuga sadhana bhakti unless one's rati has started to awaken. It's impossible. It makes no sense. In order to practice Raganuga sadhana bhakti, one has to have some indication of one's Sai Bhakti. Has to. Again, there's the definition of Raganuga sadhana is like that.
So after Anartha Nivritti in Asakti stage, Rati can be.
Before even a Shakti, I mean, Prabhupada says most of the Anartas are gone. Sometimes, I mean, sometimes Prabhupada says Anartas are gone, meeting, eating, intoxication, illicit sex, and gambling. I mean, that's a pretty liberal definition. Sometimes Prabhupada just talks about at least 50% of the Anartas gone. I mean, from what I can ascertain from Madhurya Kadambini, Nishta occurs when like 40 to 50% of the Anartas are gone. There's still Anartas that are leaving through the higher stages of Bhakti. But generally, Nishta, Ruchi, and Ashakti are the time of Raganuga sadhana. Generally, I mean, we're making general statements. Individuals are individuals, and there's always Kripa-siddhi. There's always Kripa-siddhi. So keep that in mind too. And always some Kripa is involved, even in sadhana siddha. There's always some mercy involved. Prabhupada also says that a Baba boss can turn to Baba. So that's also possible. You know, he says in a festival, and in this section about Sattva kebabs, talks like some great festival or in a holy place. So let's say you have somebody very new in spiritual life, and they're at some major festival in Vrindavan or Mayapur at a holy day, at a holy place. Even though they're a beginner in bhakti, it is possible for Rati to sprout then if they're not offensive. That is possible. It certainly isn't a general norm, but it's possible and it happens.
It depends on the mood, no matter. It depends on the mood, whether they are in the Raganuga, then the mood.
Yeah, I mean, you can't make some sort of an absolute formula, is my point. You can't say this is an absolute, and again, my comparison would be, when does a person enter puberty? You can't make a formula, because for some people they're 9. Some people enter puberty when they're 9. Some people, it's not till they're 17. And then the way we mature is different for each person. You know, some people are emotionally, we have a student here who's 11. He's already second initiated. I mean, he's very much a child physically, but devotionally, he's very mature. Intellectually, he's very mature. Emotionally, he's very mature. So in all those ways, physically, he's a child. And in some ways, he's a child. I mean, he likes to play like a child. But he's very mature in bhakti, even though he's a child. He's far more mature than some of our devotees who are 25. So this is just how things are. You can't put an absolute formula on it. And we see that when we talk about Kanista, Madhyama, and Uttamara, these different stages, which we didn't so much talk about in the Southern Ocean, you'll see that some devotees are very mature in their chanting, but they're not very mature in how they respect prasadam, or they're not very mature in how they respect devotees. And then you have other people that are super mature in how they respect devotees, but they're not so mature in how they respect their chanting. And, this is just the way it is. People mature in different areas at different rates, depending on their past lives or whatever it is. So generally, Rati is going to sprout when like half of the anartas are removed, generally. But it may come earlier due to Kripa, and it may come later. I mean, sometimes people are so actively resisting awakening their love for Krishna that it has difficulty sprouting. So that we also see. This is one of the donkey urine baths that Bhaktivinoda details in his commentary on Raghunath Das Goswami's Manashiksha, verse 6. People they just want to be philosophical. They don't want to have any emotions in bhakti. And so they get to a point where the emotion should be awakening. and they're not, because the person is actively resisting. Yes. Also, Vaishnava aparad is a really good way to kill Rati manifest. So even if a person appears to be free of anarthas in a technical sense, if they're offensive to devotees, that, you know, it's just not going to happen. And if it starts to happen and they're offensive to devotees, then they're really going to kill the whole thing. It's like pouring bleach on your little plant.
Yes, Mother, thank you.
Is that all right?
Yes, Mother, thank you.
Anybody else a question on sattvic abhavs? Okay, we are going to take a break now for 10 minutes. So we will come back in 10 minutes, 6:30 in the morning for me, whatever time that will be for all of you in your various parts of the world. Please take a real break. Get away from your phone, get away from your computer, go outside, chant some japa, have some prasadam, something, move around. Take a real break, and we'll see you again in 10 minutes. All right. Hare Krishna. Hope you all had a very good break. Okay, so we're going to continue. Okay, we're going on to the Vyavichari Bhavs. So the Vyavichari Bhavs, Rupa Goswami describes varieties. What are the various causes? That they're in relation to the primary and secondary Sthai Bhavs, the stages, and the strength. So here we see a more detailed description of the relationship between the bhavas. So the emotions of the Vyavichari Bhavs plus the Rati, the basic connection of Sthai Bhav, produces this state of sattva, which again is not sattva gun, and then produces sattvika bhavs and anubhavs. So the emotions, these feelings, they're not exactly voluntary or involuntary, but they are the causes of both the voluntary and the involuntary actions. Now, some of the words that are used to describe these Vyavichari Bhavs may sound like sattvika bhavs or sound like anubhavs, because sometimes it's difficult to separate out the causative emotion from the physical action. So here are the 33 Vyavichari Bhavs. As someone asked a question for today's class about the gopis in the Rasa Lila chapters, and certainly in relation to the Vyavichari Bhavs, certainly we find a number of these Vyavichari Bhavs are exhibited there. In fact, examples given of these Vyavichari Bhavs by Rupa Goswami in this section often involve the gopis and their feelings. To go more deeply, specifically into Madhurya Ras, would be the follow-up book to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is Ujjwala Nilamani. So Rupa Goswami wrote Ujjwala Nilamani, where he discusses the Vibhavs, Sattvika Bhavs, Anubhavs, Vyavichari Bhavs, and Sthai Bhavs only for Madhurya Rati, only for the Madhurya Ras. So in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he's discussing briefly for all of the primary and secondary rasas, and in Ujjwala Nilamani just for Madhurya Bhav. So for those of you who are interested just in studying this, these topics in relation just to Madhurya Bhav, there's Ujjwala Nilamani. Bhanu Swami has translated it along with the commentaries of Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So Rupa Goswami explains that one Vyavichari Bhav can have other emotions included in it. Right? And we find this even with our material emotions, that a person can be very angry, but they're very angry because they're frightened, or they're very angry because they're feeling guilty about something, or they're very angry because they're disappointed, right? And they can feel, a person can feel shame because they're disappointed. So one emotion can be nested inside another, and also one emotion can cause another. And Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada give a very detailed description what emotion can cause what emotion that can cause what emotion. In our class on Vyavichari Bhavs, we don't even go into it in depth because it would take several classes just to talk about the causes and effects of the Vyavichari, how the Vyavichari bhavs cause each other and are the effects of each other. So the types of Vyavichari bhavs. So there's the dependent on Rati and the independent of Rati. So dependent on Rati, they're superior and inferior. Superior is it's born of the person's Rati and it nourishes their Rati. So it comes from their basic relationship and it nourishes their basic relationship. So there's direct, it's born from their primary relationship. So their emotion comes from their feeling of parental bhava and it nourishes the parental bhava. Or indirect, it's coming from their sense of wonder and it nourishes their sense of wonder. Then inferior, it's not born of Rati or nourishes it. And that would be like Arjuna's fear seeing the universal form. Then there's Vyavichari bhavs that are independent of Rati. One is void, those who only have a semblance of Rati. They have Rati abhas. They have some emotions related to Krishna, but they only have a Rati abhas. Then there's emotions that are not born from their Rati, but later touch Rati. This is like when Mother Yasoda was afraid, seeing Putana in a dream, and she was just afraid, and then she thought about Krishna, and with the fragrance of Rati. So this is like Srimati Radharani feeling shame when she is pointed out by her elders that she's wearing Krishna's cloth. So that's not coming from her conjugal love for Krishna, it doesn't nourish her conjugal love for Krishna, but there's a fragrance of her conjugal love for Krishna in that emotion of shame. Then there's semblance of Vyavichari bhavs. There's reflections or semblance. So in people hostile to Krishna, when some demon is feeling disappointment or fear or guilt, and it has some relation to Krishna, but there's no Rati. They don't have any love for Krishna. So although they have an emotion and that emotion is in relation to Krishna, it's just a semblance of a Vyavichari bhavs. And then inappropriate, when a devotee imagines Vyavichari bhavs in someone who's not really feeling them. So the gopis imagine that the trees are having Madhurya bhav. They're imagining that the trees are feeling the way they're feeling. Materially, this is called projection, or Atmavan Mandite Jagat. I think everyone else is feeling the way I'm feeling. But there's something like this that happens in the spiritual realm too, where a devotee may project their emotions onto especially plants and animals in ways that those plants and animals are not actually experiencing them. Then there's stages of Vyavichari bhavs, the emotion. And again, we can see that this happens with material emotions too. There's a time when the emotion begins and there's a time when the emotion ends. There's also two or more emotions can unite. And also there can be an emotion which is then taken over by another emotion, or there can be two conflicting emotions at one time. And these can be from, there's all different ways that these can combine. Sometimes they're two or more emotions from the same impetus, sometimes two or more emotions from different impetus, sometimes similar emotions from the same impetus, sometimes conflicting emotions from the same impetus, sometimes similar emotions from different impetuses, and so forth and so on. Okay, what emotions are the devotees experiencing? So the devotee has their primary sthai-bhav, say friendship. Then they have the 7 secondary sthai-bhavs, laughter, wonder, fear, etc. Then they have the 33 Vyavichari bhavs, which gives 41 emotions that devotees experience in rasa. Here's another way of understanding the relationships. There's the dominant primary sthai-bhav, the dominant primary rati, the dominant primary basic relationship. Then the 33 Vyavichari bhavs emotions, the 7 secondary sthai-bhavs emotions, those mixed together, stimulated by the vibhava, then produce anubhavas and sattvika bhavas. Rupa Goswami gives two different, and Jiva give two different analogies about the relationship between the Sthai Bhav and the Anubhava. So one is that there's innate bhavas manifest in 5 kinds of rati and pervade a being as redness pervades the inside and the outside of the Indian matter. So that's a madder, M-A-D-D-E-R, that's a plant. So just like a person has their basic rati of servitorship, it pervades them. It's everything. It colors them completely. It's who they are. Then you also have induced bhavas. So you have something that's not who they are, but there's some emotion that's affecting them. And this is like a white cloth that's been dyed red. So it's not innately red, it's dyed red. So a person may be filled with shame or this or that, or anger or bewilderment, but that's not their basic nature. All right, and sometimes the Vyavichari bhavs cannot be perceived. So sometimes a devotee is experiencing these different emotions, but other people can't tell. And there's a whole, again, detailed analysis. If you want to go back and look at our class on this, it's a very detailed analysis. So this is generally caused by mixed motives in a devotee. And there's not much transformation of the body or the external senses. And this is due to their nature being heavy, deep, or expansive. And then there's situations where the devotee's emotions are very easily perceived by others or more easily perceived by others because their nature is light, spread on the surface, or small. Or like a small meaning like in a little hut, an elephant is very visible if an elephant's next to a little hut, and in a great city, an elephant is not very visible. So that's what we mean by small. Okay, some questions on Vyavichari bhavs. Any questions on Vyavichari bhavs? Prabhupada Priya?
Yeah, I was just thinking that, if somebody's at an advanced level of Krishna consciousness, or maybe they're just having a very Krishna conscious moment, then there's a tendency to, see everyone, like, say you're in the temple and you're just really getting into whatever the katha or the kirtan or service. Then there's a tendency to see that everybody else is also feeling what you're feeling. You think that everybody else is in ecstasy, is really absorbed, and they're feeling it, the way you're feeling it. And I just wonder how that relates to these things.
That would be that semblance of Vyavichari bhavs, yes. Actually, you're saying that, I remember that happened to me once in London. Some of you know Mahavishnu Swami, the one who wears the funny hat and the 2 different color shoes. So he took us out on a kirtan in the streets of London. And this is a funny story, so I'll take a minute and actually tell this story. So I was not familiar with London. I was new to London. And we went out on Harinam. And when I got out there, it was the summertime, but London can go through a whole summer without having any day that at least I would call a summer. So I've been in London for an entire summer and never experienced 24 hours that I would call a summer. They have the heat on in the night and in the early morning, even in the summertime. Anyway, so it was a summer day and I went out thinking that I should dress for the summer, and it was chilly and it was rainy. And I thought, oh, we'll go back to the temple, but Londoners are not going to go back to the temple because it's chilly and rainy. So we went on with this Harinam, and we're moving through the central London, but we're going under awnings and stuff so that we wouldn't get drenched. And at one point we were under a store awning. I'm thinking there were maybe 20, 25 of us, and Mahavishnu Swami was leading this kirtan. And I became so absorbed in the kirtan that I really felt that I was no longer in the material world. I mean, I had experience of that with Srila Prabhupada in the airport in 1975 in New York. But then there were only devotees around. But in this case, there was, lots and lots of not devotees walking around central London. And there was about 5 minutes that my perception was that everybody who was walking by us was also in the spiritual world. That was how I perceived things. All the people doing their shopping and sightseeing or going to work or whatever they were doing, getting their lunch, were all in the spiritual world. So I had about 5 minutes like that in the kirtan. It was quite astonishing. By the way, it was very interesting when we walked back to the temple, it was pouring, absolutely pouring. And so Mahavishnu Swami took us into one shop after another to get out of the rain. So we came back to the temple by going into a shop and going out and then going into another shop and doing Harinam in the shops. That was quite an experience. The only shops that wouldn't let us in were the shops that were the meat-eating restaurants, the gambling places, and the liquor stores. All the other shops let us do our Harinam. So anyway. Yes.
Is that the vision of the Uttama Adhikari, that they see like that all the time?
I'm sure whatever the Uttama Adhikari sees is 100,000 million times more than my experience for that 5 minutes. But yes, I'm sure I just got a little abbas. But yes, like that. Everyone's a devotee. Everything's already the spiritual world. Yes. Rukmini.
Yes, so we talked about the emotions nesting in the other emotions, and one example was, I think it was, so it was talked about how there could be an emotion that is not connected with Krishna and then it becomes connected with Krishna, like Jashoda experiencing fear and then connecting it with Krishna. So can material emotions in a sadhaka, if that eventually leads to, if after the nesting, then eventually that lead to an emotion that is connected with Krishna, and then would that be an actual, I forget which bhav it is now, an actual Anubhava or whatever it was. No, Vyabhichari bhav. Yeah.
Yes. Again, there's, when we talk about actual. So, it's not going to necessarily be a Vyabhichari bhav like somebody in prema, but yes. In fact, that is a technique of sadhana. A technique of sadhana is to take whatever is in our purview or in our external or internal experience in this world and relate that to Krishna, because it is related to Krishna. So a sadhana is to intentionally make that relationship to Krishna. I look at the sky. Was yesterday morning at sunrise. The sky here was just gorgeous, both in the western and eastern horizon. It was incredible. And so there was a sense of wonder. But I can bring it to Krishna. The sky is Krishna's navel. The clouds are his hair. The color of the sunrise, Aruna, is the color of his lips and his palms and his feet. Or I can bring it to Krishna with how artistic he is. So my initial feeling of wonder was just, wow, that's, what do they call it? Eye candy. It was just that it was something pleasing to my eyes. That was my initial response. My initial response was not Krishna. But then as a sadhaka, I bring it to Krishna. Oh, let me feel wonder at Krishna. So that's true even for the siddhas like Mother Yasoda. Why can't it be true for the sadhakas? That's what we're supposed to do. It's not like we're just going to wake up one day and all of a sudden everything's going to be related to Krishna. That I've walked around never relating anything to Krishna, and then I just do my devotional service mechanically. And I go through life mechanically as a materialist. And then somehow, just poof, I wake up, wow, I see Krishna everywhere. But sadhana bhakti means I'm making a deliberate effort. And that's true with, with any of my emotions. It's true with any, I give a lot of these examples. One thing that happened to me recently, and I've taught this up in a few of my classes lately. So I was dealing with some devotees some weeks ago who said to me, Urmila, what can I do for you? And I said to this devotee, you know exactly what you can do for me. I said, I don't even have to tell you. You know exactly what I want and exactly what you can do for me. And the devotee said, well, I this reason and that reason. And, you know, it's kind of funny. Like, what can I do for you? You know what you can do. Well, I have this reason, that reason. You know, I would do it if I could. Right? Like someone says, well, if I had a lot of money, I'd give it to you. If I was famous, I'd promote Krishna. Well, what are you doing now? What are you doing with the money you have now? What are you doing with the fame you have now? You know, so forth. Anyway, so after this devotee said that, and we finished our conversation, I was feeling a lot of frustration. I was feeling frustration. I was feeling disappointment. I was feeling irritated. Right? This nonsense person, just making excuses. And I thought, okay, where is there in Krishna Lila something like that? Oh, that's how all the residents of Vrindavan feel when Krishna doesn't come back from Mathura. He goes to Mathura, and when he goes to Mathura, he says, I'm coming back in a few days, right? That's what he says. I'll be back in a few days. I'm just going to go for this wrestling thing. And after the wrestling thing, yeah, I've got to kill Kamsa. He goes for the wrestling thing. He kills Kamsa. Does he come back? No. Oh, now I have to go to school. He goes to school. Does he come back? No. He gets married.
Well, he
How's
fights
gonna
with
come back?
Jarasandha.
Yeah, he fights with Jarasandha. He fights with Jarasandha. Marries Rukmini. Now how is he going to come back? He's going to live with Rukmini in Vrindavan? How is he possibly going to come back? And then he starts marrying more women. How is he possibly going to come back? What's this nonsense? He's going to come back. And he sends letters and messengers. I'm always thinking of you. Then come back. You know, a bunch of excuses. And so I started meditating. This is how the residents of Vrindavan are thinking. Krishna, you're just making a bunch of excuses. Why aren't you coming back? And then all my irritation and aggravation of this other devotee dissipated. The material emotions they became silly.
So my question was more about the transformation of the emotions or the nesting. That could it be that the original emotion was material and that, so that one just remains sort of the way it was, and one goes into another emotion which that and connects that to Krishna? Or is it that if it's connected with Krishna, then the whole chain gets connected with Krishna?
At least just speaking from my personal experience. No, I can't give you a pramana for it. But the other thing that I was saying, there are evidences where we're actually told to do that, to take our material emotions and then find something commensurate in the Lila. As far as what you're asking, I don't have a pramana for it. My own experience is the whole chain gets changed. That's my own.
Thank you.
Just speaking from my own personal experience. And the experience that I have, that I know from other devotees who make an effort to do this. So you don't, the initial instigating material emotion dissipates. It becomes laughable and absurd. You know, it has no value anymore. You see it for what it is. You see that it's a reflection of the spiritual, and that there's no taste in it anymore.
Yeah, it's insubstantial. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you start feeling, it's param drisva nivartate. You start experiencing the real taste and therefore the lower taste. Because we're all these material emotions, we're trying to get rasa from them. We're trying to enjoy them. We may not want to admit that. How am I trying to enjoy being aggravated and disappointed and frustrated with this devotee who's making so many excuses? This is not pleasure. I'm not getting any taste, but we are. Because all of those are vyavichari bhavs. They are all tastes. And yes, We are trying to enjoy our aggravation and our disappointment and our frustration and our criticism. Yes, we are. But there's not really any taste in it. Chewing the chew. And so when we switch it to the real taste, then the false taste just, you know, if you're chewing on paper and someone gives you, you know, a chapati, then you naturally aren't interested in the paper. But if we don't practice that, if we keep chewing the paper, then what?
Yes, like when I was a child, I would, you know, have some joy in wiggling my loose tooth. And it's, yeah.
Yes.
Doesn't last.
That's right.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Okay. So go to the next.
Hi, Krishna. Mataji, just a short question.
Very quick.
Yeah, you know, the previous slide, first is primary, and then 7 secondary, and the total came to 43. 33 are Vyabhichari vows. How? What am I missing?
33 plus 7
Huh?
plus 1. 33 plus 7 plus 1.
What? 1 plus 7, 8.
8 plus
41, not 43. Okay, fine. Sorry, thank
Okay.
you. My mistake.
No
My mistake.
problem. No, you don't have to be sorry for asking questions. Asking questions is very desired. Okay, Staiba. So there's primary and secondary Staibas, pure and mixed. There's the rasa from Rati in the primary and secondary, the colors and deities, and taste. Okay, so the primary ones, neutrality, servitorship, friendship, parental, conjugal. The secondary ones, humor, chivalry, wonder, anger, fear, disgust, and compassion, temptation. Somebody needs to mute. Mute, somebody needs to mute. Okay. Great. And each of these can be self-nourishing or other nourishing. They can nourish themselves or they can nourish others. So in the neutral rasa, there's 3 types. General, which is by people in general or by small children. Transparent, where a person, they don't take any actions in any of the other rasas, but they experience the emotions and inclinations of all the rasas without taking any actions, just appreciating from one to another and peaceful. This is like where the Brahmavadis come to love for Bhagavan, but in a peaceful way. I just like someone may admire a movie star. Okay, so the next 3 primary Staibas over neutrality, servitorship, friendship, and parental. This is a feeling of possessiveness. Okay, Vinata wrote 7 plus 5. No, it's not 7 plus 5, and it's at 7 plus 1. Because you only have, Vinata wrote the 7 plus 5 plus 33 is 45, but it's 7 plus 1 plus 33. So we're talking about for an individual. An individual has 1 primary Staiba plus the 7 primary Staibas, but the 7 secondary Staibas plus the 33 Vyabhichari vows. So we're talking about how many emotions there are altogether. We're talking about how many emotions for an individual. Okay, she wrote that as a private message. So 3 other primary Staibas are servitorship, friendship, and parental, which have possessiveness, mamata. Krishna is my master. Krishna is my friend. Krishna is my child. These are not present in neutrality, especially the peaceful neutrality. Peaceful neutrality, there's not even a sense of my Lord. So there might be a little bit of my Lord in the other 2 neutral, but in peaceful neutral, no like that. and deep friendliness to the Lord, which is not present in the neutral. Now, these can be single or mixed. So you can have mixed servant and friendship. You can have mixed parental and friendship, like that. You can have mixed conjugal and servant. All right, then the conjugal, the most intimate primary staibhav, where there's mutual enjoyment. This is between women and Krishna. There's an emotional state of being the Lord's lover. This is the greatest sense of mamata and the greatest sense of friendliness. So Krishna is my lover. And it's explained, and we discussed this at length, that there is a successively superior taste from neutrality to conjugal. Each becomes more blissful with taste and delight. But for each devotee, there's a relationship that is their perfect relationship, so that it's best for them. So each individual devotee is going to experience a particular primary staibhav as the most satisfying for them. Oh, by the way, in the mixed primary staibhavs, one is always dominant. So if it's mixed servitorship and friendship, one is going to be dominant. And we usually will discuss the devotee according to what is dominant. So the secondary staibhavs, this is 7 varieties of emotional states that act like rati. They're also stimulated by vibhava, alambana, vishaya. And this is when the primary staibhav becomes, instead of self-nourishing, becomes other-nourishing. So the primary staibhav nourishes the secondary staibhav and retreats to the background. So you have your main relationship as a friend, but you start laughing together, and the laughter, the relationship of laughter and humor takes over. Like I eat dinner often with my granddaughter and her family, and sometimes we're telling jokes. So there's our main relationship is I'm the grandmother. So my main relationship with them is parental. There's some friendship also. There's definitely some friendship. But if we're laughing together, the laughter can take over and the parental recedes, so that the laughter becomes our main relationship. Or sometimes my grandson-in-law and I have a debate. And so the chivalry rasa takes over and the parental recedes and subdues itself and nourishes the other. So of the 7 secondary rasas, Krishna is the direct cause of hasya, vishmaya, utsaha, shoka, krodha, and bhaya, but is not the direct cause of yugupsa. So no one's ever disgusted with Krishna. They're disgusted at their material attachments that keep them from Krishna, but they're not disgusted with Krishna. Although Krishna can be the cause of laughter, Krishna can be the cause of wonder, he can be the cause of chivalry, the cause of compassion, the cause of anger, and the cause of fear. Sometimes one might be afraid that a demon will hurt Krishna and so forth. And I really like this description. And that laughter is cheerfulness of the heart. Wonder is, what could this be? Chivalry is firm and immediate attachment. And to 4 things: to battle, to charity, to compassion, or to dharma. This is explained more in the Northern Ocean and explained more at the end of Nectar of Devotion. Lamentation is intense pain in the heart. Anger is flaming of the heart. Fear is extreme unsteadiness of the heart, and ghastliness is a restriction of the heart. So we had a question for this class about chivalry in the spiritual world. So chivalry in the spiritual world is certainly in the mock fighting between the cowherd boys and Krishna. There is also chivalry between the gopis and Krishna. There's descriptions by our acharyas about wagers, games, wagering games that are between the gopis and Krishna. And there's also sometimes chivalry. There's descriptions, Kavi Karnapur describes it in Ananda Vrindavan Champu, how there's a holy festival. There's Krishna, there's the cowherd boys and the gopis. So they're having this mock fighting. There's descriptions in Chaitanya Charitamrita of the water fights between Krishna and the gopis. In Dwarka and Mathura, we have examples as given in the Bhagavatam, where there's game playing. Krishna is playing games of chess. in Dwarka when this demon created by Sudakshina comes. So that's also a chivalrous activity going on in the spiritual world. Now, I don't know about in the Vaikunthas, a reasonable extrapolation, because Bhishma has a mood of servitorship and chivalry, and he goes to Vaikuntha, is that there's some kind of mock fighting that goes on also in Vaikuntha. We know that in this world, a king will sometimes engage servants to mock fight with him and wrestle with him in order for him to hone his fighting skills. And he enjoys like that. And one can certainly think that some of the game playing that goes on in Dwarka and Mathura would also go on in Ayodhya and Vaikuntha. Okay, we have a question. Are there demons in the spiritual world? No, there are hints of demons. Is there disgust with the Virata Rupa? No, one is not feeling disgust at the Virata Rupa itself. Fear from the Virata Rupa, but not disgust at the Virata Rupa. Okay, so this is yet another way of explaining the relationships. And this is that the Vibhavas, the Anubhavas, Sattvika Bhavas, Brahmachari Bhavas all nourish the secondary sthai bhavas, right? Which is related to the primary sthai bhav that then goes in the background, nourishes the secondary sthai bhav that then takes the status of a primary sthai bhav and the devotee producing a taste. So this is the way in which the secondary sthai bhavs can be explained as a sthai bhav rather than a vyavichari bhav. Although Jiva Goswami says that Rupa actually thinks the secondary sthai bhavs are vyavichari bhavs, and out of respect for Bharat Muni, presents the secondary sthai bhavs as secondary sthai bhavs rather than vyavichari bhavs. However, we do see that Rupa Goswami goes to great lengths to explain how these secondary sthai bhavs are sthai bhavs. And he does explain them in an entirely different section than he explains the vyavichari bhavs. So it's certainly, if it is a nod to Bharat Muni, it's a lot more than a cursory nod to Bharat Muni. All right, now are we going to use the term rasa, or are we going to use the term rati, or are we going to use the term sthai bhav? So I'm sure everyone has noticed that Srila Prabhupada almost exclusively used the term rasa. He very rarely used the term rati to describe the basic relationship, and very rarely used the term sthai bhav to describe the basic relationship. He would use the term rasa. So when a devotee is at prema, then their sthai bhav or their rati is called rasa, because they're experiencing rasa. So then it's called dasya rasa, sakya rasa, vatsalya rasa, madhurya rasa. Before a person attains a state of prema, it's called their sthai bhav or their rati. And of course, Rupa Goswami is using these terms, and so I felt it useful to use these terms so that one could understand Rupa Goswami. Okay, any questions about sthai bhav? Questions about sthai bhav? Kasturika.
Hare Krishna Mataji. So
Hi.
if we are following, say for example, if one devotee is attracted to one particular rasa, does it mean that his sthai bhav will be that, or he's just attracted? Say for example, I really like Mother Yashoda. So does it mean that, you know, as my maturity in Krishna consciousness grows, that I will also become parental mood of relating to Krishna? Is it like that?
It can be. In fact, Srila Prabhupada and Rupa Goswami both say several times that when we hear about the various pastimes, what we're attracted to is indicative of our rati. It's one of the ways of telling what one's rati is. You want to make sure, for a beginning person, we may be attracted to something just because of our material situation. You know, I know a lot of devotee children who assumed that they were cowherd boys because they were children and they were playful. And so they just identified with that. And I know of at least one devotee who grew up in Krishna consciousness who told me, you know, from the time she was little, she identified with the cowherd boys. And now she's in her 30s and she still identifies with the cowherd boys. And she's having feelings as a cowherd boy. And I know another devotee who grew up in the movement who told me, you know, when I was a little child, I identified with the cowherd boys. And now that this person is in 30s or 40s, I think, the person is saying, oh, you know, I want to assist Srimati Radharani and I want to facilitate Radharani's pastimes with Krishna. So sometimes one's attraction may be just due to our material state, you know, and our material associations. You know, especially or it may be something intellectual. If someone just says, well, the gopis are the highest and I want to be the highest, so I'm going to be a gopi. You know, that's what I've analyzed from Srila Prabhupada is whenever devotees came to Srila Prabhupada discussing these things intellectually, he would shut it down. Like if they said, Srila Prabhupada, how does one go to, this is a real thing. How does one go from bhava to prema? Prabhupada said, don't ask this question now, you'll find out later. However, when devotees came to Srila Prabhupada, there's one time in a conversation, I think it was with Hamsadutta, where the devotee said to Srila Prabhupada, suppose there's a new bhakta, not yet initiated, who loves the cowherd boys and feels that he's a cowherd boy. And Prabhupada said, that's very nice. That is the goal. That is the perfection. So whenever devotees went to Srila Prabhupada on the emotional level about these things, Prabhupada encouraged them. When they went to him on the intellectual, philosophical level, he would discourage them. Now, also everybody's familiar with the Gopi Baba Club, but some things to be aware of with the Gopi Baba Club. First of all, the devotees were exclusively reading about the gopis and not reading anything else. So that's a sign immediately that someone is false, that it's false. Also, the thing that made Prabhupada very angry and that made him shut it down is that they criticized Madhya Soda. They said, we don't want to hear anything about Madhya Soda. Prabhupada became like fire and shut the whole thing down. So that should be taken into consideration. So that's another indication that something is false, that a person is that, well, I'm only going to hear about the cowherd boys. I'm not going to hear any other pastimes. I mean, Prabhupada talked about how, you know, the devotees want to hear about Krishna's all of Krishna's pastimes. It's not that, you know, that you don't want to hear about Dwarka or Mathura at all. I mean, I know Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says some things in that. I mean, one devotee I met that I consider, she's passed away now, was genuine in this regard. So she definitely had an affinity for Madhurya Bhav, and she had a definite affinity for following Tunga Vidya Gopi. But she loved everything in the Bhagavatam. And she was an elderly lady in her life prior to Krishna's consciousness. She was ethnically Indian, although she was born and raised in South Africa, not in India. And before coming to Krishna consciousness, she used to chant Krishna Rama whenever she would walk. Like every step, she would say Krishna Rama, Krishna Rama, Krishna. She was a medical doctor, and she had actually run a whole medical institution. So she was a highly educated, highly together person, a very solid person. She was connected to the political leaders there in Cape Town. And whenever she would talk about at least privately, when she would talk about anything in the Bhagavatam, she was feeling ecstasy. I mean, I just remember she was just talking to me about stories in the Bhagavatam. And she said, and then there was Atri Muni, and he was walking on one leg. And I thought, what are these ladies feeling ecstasy talking about Atri Muni on one leg? I was surprised. But everything in the Bhagavatam filled her with ecstasy, although she herself had the mood of a gopi. So that's something else. And how does one know if it's real? Well, first of all, generally, one should be free at least of the gross anarthas and have becoming free of a lot of the subtle anarthas. Generally, unless there's some kind of crepusity in some sort of extraordinary circumstance, which does happen. Unless one is near the end of anartha nivritti, these things they can't manifest. It's something material. The other thing is it doesn't go away. That even if you try to make it go away, it stays. If you're thinking, oh, this can't be real, I'm not mature enough, I'm too fallen, it's probably just, and it just persists and persists and persists.
Thank
I hope
you.
that's Mahasingha Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Mataji. You have answered majority of my question in your just last talk, but still I would like to say that why shall someone meditate or contemplate and think of his bhava, because we are eternal servant and we should be fully satisfied in whatever capacity we are able to serve the mission and Srila Prabhupada and Krishna, and that should be the mood. And why we are just, because that's why Srila Prabhupada didn't appreciate this, because we artificially meditate and we contemplate and we try to enter and do this and that. It's like something very...
Yes, Prabhupada never appreciated the artificial, but he did appreciate the real.
Yes, so real means one will be really happy in serving Krishna in any capacity. As you explained this, Mataji, the last example we gave and last example you talked about, that how the people will be, and he will appreciate everything because Krishna is a whole.
Yes, yes, that's definitely one of the signs that, we're looking at different signs. Is it real or is it artificial? One sign is if I only am appreciating what I say is my mood and I don't appreciate Krishna as a whole. That's one very strong sign. Is it real or not?
Yeah.
It's a very strong sign. Another strong sign generally is one a serious, mature devotee. Again, there is crepusity, but generally it's like that. Another sign is it intellectual or is it emotional? And another sign is does it persist? Does it persist? So these are some signs, and then one should consult. I mean, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati talks about this, which we quote him in our introductory chapter in Srimana Shiksha, that one should consult with ideally one's guru, if one's guru is physically present and accessible. And if that's not possible, then with senior Vaishnavas, that I'm having these feelings, I'm having these inclinations, and maybe I've had this experience, maybe I've had some incredible spiritual experience, and I don't think that this could be real, and I don't think that I'm mature and I can't understand it. And what should I do? And so one should take guidance. So Rukmini writes that it may affect one if one's Sthai Bhav only is in a different gender than one's present one. Prabhupada, of course, makes this point earlier in the Nectar Devotion quite strongly, that even those who are males in this life might have a Madhurya relationship with Krishna in a female form in the spiritual world, and those who are females in this life might have a friendship relationship with Krishna in a male form. As far as I know, the only one that only occurs in a different gender is the Madhurya. So Krishna also has female friends. Draupadi, for example, is counted as one of Krishna's friends. She's in a friendship rasa. So Krishna does have lady friends. We generally think of the friends as all being male, but they're not. Okay. Thank you very much. So we're going to go on. We are coming to the end. So this is rasa and its component parts. So again, that they have these different bhavas, have their different parts. When they combine and form rasa, one can still recognize the different elements, but only subtly. So we can say some bhavas are the causes or effect of other bhavas. When they are combined, they no longer appear as causes or effect. One may subtly taste them, like you can taste, oh, there's a banana in here, there's strawberry. Rupa Goswami talks at length about poetry and drama. In ordinary poetry and drama, the characters portrayed are ordinary. The actors are just doing a job. The hearer or the audience is the cause of rasa. When it's about the Lord and devotees, the personalities are divine. The divine personalities can enter into the actors. And so the original personalities, the actors and the audience are all causing rasa. This is based on Jiva Goswami's commentary 25107. So before the stage of bhava, we are just getting hints of these things, because understanding the exchanges of transcendental loving service as Krishna is possible only when one is in touch with the pleasure potency of the Hladini Shakti. Now, even in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, Mahatmanas tumam partam daivi prakriti mashritaha, we're under the control of this divine energy. But until we're completely flooded with this Hladini Shakti, we are just getting hints. And the only cause of rasa is rasa. Love nourishes love. Like the clouds are produced in the ocean and the clouds then rain on the ocean. And briefly, Rupa and Srila Prabhupada explained the colors and the presiding deities of each of the rasas. So we had a question about the presiding deity for Dasi ras, that's Madhava. And this may be because Madhava can mean Ma, can mean Lakshmi, and Dava can mean husband. So Madhava can mean Lord Narayana, and therefore he can be considered the Lord of servitorship. Then Rupa and Srila Prabhupada go through an explanation of why some of these rasas may appear to be miserable, but are actually ecstatic. And particularly Rupa looks at the three of the seven secondary rasas, the lamentation or compassion, fear, and disgust. And he says how each of these can actually be ecstatic. And there's an explanation from Jiva Goswami's commentary of 5 types of people, which Srila Prabhupada just puts into categories of inexperienced and experts. So those who experience rasa, the prema bhaktas, they understand how lamentation, fear, and disgust can all be blissful. In bhava, they understand because of the association of the prema devotees. For those who understand intellectually, they understand philosophically how these can be blissful. Those who think they understand but don't, they don't really get it. And then those who don't know anything about it certainly don't get it. All right. So experiencing bhakti ras. First, there has to be a connection with Krishna. There has to be some rati. This happens through sadhana, mainly hearing and chanting. When it finally becomes bhava, the basic connection is sufficiently real to produce bhakti rasa, but it's only tasted fully and easily at prema. It's tasted slightly at bhava. In sadhana, one gets glimmers and reflections as the sadhana becomes pure. So any questions or comments about rasa? We have very little time because we have a couple other things that I want us to do. So I could take maybe one question. Anybody has a question? Vinata, you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what does it mean that the presiding deity of rasa? Is it like ideal of with whom such rasa can be exchanged, or what is the meaning of this presiding deity?
That person exemplifies that rasa, like Kalki exemplifies chivalry, and that he's fighting against the demons and the degraded person, and Ram exemplifies lamentation. Oh, Ramayana practically is a story of lamentation from beginning to end. Balaram is known for always being very jovial and joking and laughing.
That exemplifies this rasa in the best way. And sometimes we hear that Krishna is rasa. Krishna is rasa. I mean, Krishna is everything, but what does this mean, Krishna is rasa?
That Krishna, what is Krishna? Krishna is pleasure. Akila Rasa Murti. He's explained at the beginning of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He is the form of all rasas. Krishna is experiencing all possible combinations and permutations of these tastes. So each devotee is going to have a particular combination of a primary rasa and then the 7 secondary rasas, but with each devotee, it's going to be slightly different. You know, the Madhurya Bhav of Vishaka for Krishna and Lalita for Krishna is slightly different. But Krishna is tasting all of them at once. Okay, I need to go on. Lalita, Priti Mai, pick yours and then we need to go on.
Mataji, I have this question, like what we saw now, are they the contents of Rasa Tattva, or Rasa Tattva is totally a different subject matter?
As far as I know, these are the contents of Rasa Tattva, although there's certainly more to it than this, but yes. Okay. So now I'd like each of us to do something we did at the beginning. And maybe some of you even have this left over from the beginning. 5 minutes. Write a paragraph explaining the components of rasa using either English or Sanskrit terms. 5 minutes. Okay, now we're going to go into breakout groups. This is just going to be for 7 minutes and just groups of 3 people. And we're going to discuss in these, I know this is going to put us over time a little bit. I hope that's okay with everybody. We're going to discuss for 7 minutes how well we've achieved the aims of this course. So the aims of this course were to relish the mellow of devotional service to Sri Krishna during our preparation time. I'm putting this in the chat. Class time and reflection time, bringing those realizations into our daily life. Second aim, to be able to appreciate, meditate upon, and explain the 5 components of rasa. Third aim, to bring the members of the society together with each other and nearer to Krishna, the prime entity, which is the 3rd purpose of ISKCON. And our 4th aim, to systematically understand spiritual knowledge and the techniques of spiritual life as taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Rupa Goswami, which of course is part of the 1st purpose of ISKCON. So we're just going to go 7 minutes into breakout group, then we'll come back just for 1 minute to read the dedication that Rupa Goswami gives at the end of this section of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So now if we could go into breakout groups, it's going to be 7 minutes, 3 people per group. Okay, so this is the ending dedication for the Southern Ocean of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Rukmini, would you be willing to read the Sanskrit?
I can try. Gopala Rupa Shobhang Dadhad Api Raghunath Bhava Vistari Tushyatu Sanatanatma Ma Dakshina Vibhage Sudhambhune Dheh.
Thank you. So as usual with these dedications, there's 2 translations, one about Krishna, one about Sanatana Goswami. So translation 1, may the eternal person who manifested the beautiful form of a cowherd boy and distributed his bhavas to the form of Rama as well, means Balaram, be pleased with the southern section of the ocean of nectar. Other possible translation, may Sanatana Goswami, nourisher of the glory of Gopal Bhatta Goswami and Rupa Goswami, and distributor of the prema of Raghunath Das Goswami, be pleased with the southern section of the ocean of nectar. Prabhupada ki jai. So I want to thank you all very much for your participation. I want to very much thank the VIHE for asking me to teach this. I've never studied this section before in depth, never taught it before. So I'm sure that there were unlimited faults. I hope that you will excuse those faults. And I have good qualities, which are the result wholly and solely of Srila Prabhupada, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Rupa Goswami, and all that that good can take into your life. The VIG has asked me, somebody needs to mute. The VIG has asked me to teach the Western and Northern Ocean in January, February, March. I'm thinking about it. I don't know. I have a lot of other things on my plate, so I'll think about it. These take a lot of prep, although it's nectar. So again, thank you, and thank you.
Thank you, Mataji.
Your slides were very good, Mataji. I feel very impressed, and I enjoyed seeing all the slides. There must be a lot of hard work going behind the scenes. Absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was each of these classes would take me at least 10 days of focus prep. So to analyze the sections and then to create the slides, and yes, it was a real absorption. I had to back burner a lot of other things, but it was very sweet. So thank you for appreciating it.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mahalakshmi.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Your sense of dedication is actually contagious. And Guyam Akyati Prishati, the advanced devotees explain while the less advanced devotees inquire. So this is a very beautiful platform provided for the less advanced devotees like us to come and associate.
Oh no, it's opposite. I am the less advanced devotee, but I'm just trying to serve more advanced devotees by hopefully having Rupa Goswami and Jiva Goswami and Srila Prabhupada speak through me. That's all. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Everything is around us, but we are inattentive.
I've personally never heard such a clear explanation of all these things. In fact, I haven't heard much at all as any kind of explanation of these things. It seems that no one dares to touch on these topics, and you've really made it very clear and something that's understandable and relishable, and that I could maybe explain to others and even experience and observe in my own devotional life.
Well, thank you. I'm hoping that these PowerPoints we're sharing, use them. Many of you are teachers, so please take this, and I'm going to also be sharing with you the timing that I've used to teach this and everything, so that you can take it and use it as teachers. Please teach it and make it better.
It's very, very gracious of you. I'm very grateful for all of that.
And Maharaj, thank you very much for attending and for tolerating all of my shortcomings. Most appreciated.
We are eternally grateful to you for your wonderful nectar you share with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presence here, Maharaj. Yes, Kamalini, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just the technical part, like do we need to transfer?
You're breaking up.
Yeah.
You're breaking up.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Maybe turn off your video.
Okay, thank you. I could also, the wrong thing. To review, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. In order to review, do I need to transfer all of the classes off of the WhatsApp and put them somewhere else? Or is that going to stay, that WhatsApp?
I would suggest that you download everything onto your hard drive and not figure that you're always going to have it on the WhatsApp.
Okay.
So that would be my suggestion for as far as technical things. Whatever you've gotten in the WhatsApp from Sakti Sharifini, please download it onto your hard drive. Please do not assume that that WhatsApp group is going to continue forever or that you'll have access to. And what I will also do within the next few days, I'm waiting to get something from Mahalakshmi. And as soon as I do everything with the timings, I'll share my entire folder of Nectar Devotion PowerPoint, which will also include the Eastern Ocean that I teach as part of Bhakti Shastra, which I have not taught to this whole group. So then you'll have all of my PowerPoints and lessons for both the Eastern Ocean and the Southern Ocean. So you can take that and please teach it as widely as you like and make changes to it as you like and whatever, any way you can improve it. I'm very grateful for that. If any of you want to write me any feedback, negative feedback too, is fine. I should end now or there will be no breakfast. Thank you very much. We've all been gone by other people, although Chaitanya's not cooking today because she's hurt her foot. But thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai. Thank you so much.
Thank you.